She's big.
That's the big thing I married.
I still remember the way everyone stared at me that day. The way their eyes burned into my skin like hot coals. The way the whispers started small and grew louder until they felt like screams in my ears. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could compare to the sound of my own husband's voice as he stood there in that grocery store parking lot and tore me apart in front of strangers. Look at you, Amara. You're disgusting. I can barely stand to look at you anymore. Those words came out of Richard's mouth so easily, like he had been practicing them, like he had been waiting for the perfect moment to finally say what he had been thinking for months. And he chose that moment, right there in front of the fresh market on a sunny Tuesday afternoon with my 7-month pregnant belly pressing against my oversized dress and my swollen feet aching in shoes that no longer fit properly. I was holding 2 bags of groceries, the plastic handles cutting into my palms because I had made the mistake of buying too much again. Richard had told me to only get what was on the list, but I had grabbed a few extra things. Some ice cream, a box of cookies, comfort food, because that is all I had left in this world. Food was the only thing that did not judge me, the only thing that did not make me feel like I was worthless. But Richard saw those extra items when I loaded them into the trunk of his car, and that is when he snapped. "Are you serious right now?" he had yelled, loud enough for the woman loading groceries into her van 3 spots away to turn and look. "I told you to stick to the list, Amara. But no, you could not help yourself, could you? You just had to get more junk to stuff your face with." My cheeks burned with shame as I tried to speak, tried to explain that I had only wanted something sweet, something to make me feel a little bit better after another long day of sitting alone in that house with nothing but my thoughts and the television to keep me company. But the words would not come out. They never did anymore. Richard had a way of making me feel so small that I forgot how to use my own voice. "You are already huge, Amara," he continued, his voice dripping with disgust as he looked me up and down like I was something dirty he had stepped in. 7 months pregnant, and you look like you were carrying triplets. It is embarrassing. Do you know how embarrassing it is for me to be seen with you? Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of all these people. I could feel their eyes on me, their judgment pressing down on my shoulders like a heavy weight I could not shake off. An older couple near the entrance had stopped walking to watch. A teenage boy snickered as he pushed a cart past us. Even the woman in the van was staring now, her mouth slightly open in shock. And then I saw it. A sleek black luxury car with tinted windows parked just a few spaces away. It had not been there when we arrived. I was sure of it. Something about that car made my stomach twist with an uneasy feeling like someone inside was watching this entire humiliating scene unfold. But I could not think about that right now. All I could focus on was Richard's cruel words and the way my heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces inside my chest. "Please, Richard," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Can we just go home, please?" But he was not done. He never was. "Go home? So you can sit on the couch and eat all of this junk while I'm out working to provide for you? You are pathetic, Amara. You know that? Absolutely pathetic." That is when the first tear fell. I couldn't stop it. It rolled down my cheek, hot and heavy, followed by another and another until I was standing there in that parking lot, 7 months pregnant and crying while my husband told me how much he hated the way I looked. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole so I would never have to feel this kind of pain again. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, as Richard turned away from me and got into the driver's seat without another word. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally moved. It felt like hours, but it was probably only a few seconds. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, picked up the grocery bags I had dropped, and climbed into the passenger seat beside my husband, the man who was supposed to love me, protect me, cherish me, the man who had promised to stand by my side through thick and thin. But that man was gone, or maybe he never existed at all. Before I continue with my story, I need to ask you something. If you are watching this right now, please do me a favor. Subscribe to Prisophy Stories by clicking on that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a video. Hit that like button if you are still with me, and comment down below what country you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know that someone out there understands what I went through. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand how I ended up in that parking lot, broken and humiliated, with nowhere left to turn. It was not always like this. There was a time when Richard made me feel beautiful. There was a time when he looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world, like he couldn't believe his luck that I had chosen him. That time feels like a lifetime ago now, but I remember it so clearly, like a dream I can't quite let go of. I met Richard Brooks 5 years ago at a community event in Houston, Texas. I had just moved to Texas from North Carolina for a fresh start after my mother passed away. I needed to get away from all the memories, all the pain of watching her slowly fade away from cancer. Houston felt like the right choice because it was big enough to get lost in, but small enough to still feel like home. I was working as a medical assistant at a local clinic back then, and I loved my job. I loved helping people, making them feel cared for when they were at their most vulnerable. I was good at it too. My patients always requested me specifically because I had a way of making them feel comfortable, like they mattered. And I was confident. I was a thick woman, yes, curvy and full-figured, but I carried myself with pride. I knew my worth. I knew I was beautiful just the way I was. That confidence is what caught Richard's attention the first time he saw me. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had volunteered to help organize a health fair at the community center. I was setting up a booth when I felt someone watching me. When I looked up, there he was. Tall, handsome, with a smile that could light up a room. He was wearing a nice button-down shirt and jeans, and he walked over to me with this easy confidence that made my heart skip a beat. "Hi," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Brooks. I couldn't help but notice you from across the room." I remember laughing nervously as I shook his hand. "Amara," I replied. "Amara Johnson." "Amara," he repeated, like he was tasting my name on his tongue. That's a beautiful name for a beautiful woman. I will admit I blushed. It had been a long time since anyone had flirted with me so openly, and Richard had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We talked for hours that day, long after the health fair had ended and everyone else had gone home. He told me about his job as a sales manager at a local car dealership, about his dreams of starting his own business someday, and how he had been looking for someone special to share his life with. And then he said something that made me fall for him completely. "I have to be honest with you, Amara," he said, as we sat on a bench outside the community center watching the sunset over the city. "I've always been attracted to women that look like you. Thick, curvy, confident. There's something so beautiful about a woman who is not afraid to take up space in this world. Society tries to tell us that women need to be small and thin to be attractive, but I've never believed that. I think you are absolutely stunning exactly the way you are." Those words were like music to my ears. Here was a man who appreciated me for who I was, who saw beauty in the body I had spent so many years learning to love. I felt like I had finally found someone who understood me, someone who would never try to change me or make me feel like I needed to be someone else. We started dating shortly after that, and the first few months were like something out of a fairy tale. Richard was attentive, romantic, generous. He took me to nice restaurants where he would order for both of us, always making sure I got plenty to eat because he said he loved watching me enjoy my food. He bought me gifts, expensive dresses in my size that hugged my curves in all the right ways. He introduced me to his friends and family, always keeping his arm around my waist like he was proud to have me by his side. "This is my Amara," he would say with a huge smile. "Is she not gorgeous?" And I believed him. I believed every word that came out of his mouth because I wanted so desperately to be loved. After losing my mother and feeling so alone in this big city, Richard felt like a gift from God. He felt like the answer to all my prayers. We got married after a year of dating. It was a small ceremony at a church in Houston with just a few close friends and family members. I wore a beautiful white dress that made me feel like a queen. And when Richard looked at me as I walked down that aisle, I saw tears in his eyes. Happy tears, I thought. Tears of joy because he was marrying the woman of his dreams. Looking back now, I wonder if those tears were something else entirely. I wonder if even then, on our wedding day, he was already planning how he would break me down piece by piece until there was nothing left of the confident woman I used to be. The change started slowly, so slowly that I did not even notice it at first. Little comments here and there that seemed harmless at the time, but were actually the beginning of something much darker. About 3 months after we got married, Richard came home from work one evening and found me cooking dinner in the kitchen. I was making fried chicken, collard greens, and macaroni and cheese, all his favorite foods. I was humming along to the radio, feeling happy and content in our little home. "Amara," he said as he walked into the kitchen and kissed my cheek, "can we talk for a minute?" I turned down the heat on the stove and gave him my full attention. "Of course, baby, what is on your mind?" He took my hands in his and looked into my eyes with this serious expression that made my stomach flutter with nervousness. "I've been thinking a lot lately about our future, about the kind of life I want to give you. You work so hard at that clinic, and I see how tired you are when you come home every day. It breaks my heart to see you exhausted like that." "I am fine, Richard," I assured him. "I love my job. It is what I am passionate about." "I know you do," he said softly. "But here's what I'm thinking. What if you didn't have to work anymore? What if you could stay home and focus on taking care of our house and eventually our family? I make enough money to support both of us comfortably. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I could take care of you completely." I hesitated. The idea was tempting in some ways. I was tired, that much was true. Working long hours at the clinic and then coming home to cook and clean was exhausting. But my job was more than just a paycheck to me. It was my identity. It was what made me feel valuable and purposeful. "I don't know, Richard. I appreciate the offer, but my job means a lot to me. I don't think I'm ready to give it up just yet." His expression darkened slightly, just for a moment, before the smile returned to his face. "I understand, baby. I just want you to know that the offer is there. Whenever you're ready, I just want to take care of my wife. Is that so wrong?" "Of course not," I said quickly, feeling guilty for even questioning his intentions. "You're so sweet for wanting to provide for me like that. Let me think about it, okay?" But Richard didn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, he brought it up again and again. He would come home from stories about how stressful his day had been and how he wished I was there waiting for him instead of working late at the clinic. He would talk about how nice it would be to come home to a hot meal and a clean house without me being too tired to enjoy our time together. He made it sound like quitting my job would solve all our problems, like it was the key to a happier marriage. And eventually, I gave in. I told myself I was doing it for us, for our relationship. I told myself that maybe Richard was right, that maybe I could find fulfillment in being a homemaker instead of a medical assistant. So I gave my 2 weeks notice at the clinic, and on my last day, as my coworkers threw me a small going away party, I fought back tears because deep down, I knew I was making a mistake. But I had already made my choice, and there was no going back. At first, being at home wasn't so bad. I spent my days cleaning, organizing, trying new recipes I found online. Richard seemed happier too. He would come home from work and pull me into his arms, telling me how grateful he was to have a wife who took such good care of him. For a little while, I convinced myself that I had made the right decision. But then the isolation began. Without my job, I had no reason to leave the house most days. I lost touch with my coworkers because we had nothing in common anymore. I tried reaching out to my friends from North Carolina, but the distance made it difficult to maintain those relationships. Richard never wanted to go out on weekends. He said he worked hard all week and just wanted to relax at home, and I should be there with him. "Why do you need to go out with your friends anyway?" he would ask whenever I mentioned wanting to make plans. "Am I not enough for you? Are you not happy spending time with your husband?" I didn't know how to answer those questions without starting an argument, so I stopped asking. I stopped calling my friends. I stopped making plans. I just stayed home, day after day, week after week, with nothing but my thoughts and the walls of our house to keep me company. And that's when I started eating. It wasn't a conscious decision at first. I would feel lonely or bored or sad, and I would wander into the kitchen looking for something to make me feel better. A handful of chips, a slice of cake, a spoonful of ice cream straight from the container. Food became my comfort, my escape from the emptiness I felt inside. It filled the void that my job had left behind. It numbed the pain of losing my sense of purpose. I started gaining weight. Not a lot at first, just a few pounds here and there, but Richard noticed. Of course he noticed. "Amara, are you eating more than usual?" he asked one night as we sat on the couch watching television. His eyes were on my body, scanning me like he was inspecting a product at the store. "I don't think so," I lied, even though I knew exactly what he was talking about. I had been stress eating for weeks. "Well, it looks like you have put on some weight," he said matter-of-factly. "Maybe you should watch what you're eating. I don't want you to let yourself go now that you're not working." Those words stung, but I tried to brush them off. "I'll be more careful," I promised. But I wasn't more careful. In fact, I ate even more after that conversation because his words had hurt me so deeply. I ate to forget the way he had looked at me with disappointment in his eyes. I ate to feel the emptiness that was growing inside me with each passing day. I ate because it was the only thing in my life that I could control. Except I was not in control at all. The food was controlling me. By the time I got pregnant a year into our marriage, I had gained almost 50 pounds. My clothes did not fit anymore. I felt uncomfortable in my own skin. But I thought that maybe, just maybe, the pregnancy would change things. I thought Richard would be excited about becoming a father, that he would see me differently now that I was carrying his child. I was wrong. "You were pregnant?" he said when I told him the news, his voice flat and emotionless. "Yes," I said, tears of joy streaming down my face. "We are going to have a baby, Richard. Isn't that wonderful?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I could not read the expression on his face. Finally, he forced a smile and pulled me into a stiff hug. "Yeah, that is great, Amara. Really great." But there was no excitement in his voice, no joy, just resignation, like I had given him news about something he had been dreading. The pregnancy made everything worse. My body changed in ways I could not control. My belly grew bigger and rounder with each passing week. My breasts swelled, my hips widened, my face became fuller. I felt like I was losing myself, like the woman I used to be was disappearing beneath layers of flesh I could not seem to stop accumulating. And Richard's comments became crueler. "You are really letting yourself go, Amara," he would say as he watched me eat dinner. "I can barely recognize you anymore." "Pregnancy is not an excuse to eat whatever you want," he would tell me when I reached for a second helping. You are going to have a hard time losing all that weight after the baby comes. I hope our child does not inherit your eating habits, he would joke, though there was no humor in his eyes. Each comment was like a knife to my heart. I tried to tell him how much his words hurt me, but he would just shake his head and say he was only being honest, that someone needed to tell me the truth since I clearly was not paying attention to what I was doing to my body. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror. I could not stand to see what I had become. The confident woman who had met Richard 5 years ago was gone, replaced by someone I did not recognize, someone who was ashamed of her own reflection, someone who had forgotten what it felt like to be loved. And the isolation only got worse during my pregnancy. Richard did not want me going out in public because he said I was an embarrassment. He would do the grocery shopping himself or send me with a strict list of what to buy and instructions not to deviate from it. He stopped taking me to family gatherings because he said people were talking about how much weight I had gained. He stopped touching me altogether because he said he could not find me attractive anymore. I was 7 months pregnant and completely alone. I had no job, no friends, no family nearby. I had nowhere to turn, no one to talk to about what I was going through. Richard had systematically cut me off from everyone and everything that had ever made me feel like I mattered. And now he was treating me like I was nothing. I remember lying in bed at night, my hand on my growing belly, feeling my baby kick and wondering what kind of life I was bringing this child into. I remember crying silently so Richard wouldn't hear me and accuse me of being dramatic. I remember praying to God to give me strength to show me a way out of this darkness I had fallen into. But there was no way out. I was trapped. The humiliation became a daily occurrence. Richard would criticize everything I did, everything I wore, everything I ate. He would compare me to other women, pointing out how much thinner and prettier they were. He would make jokes about my size in front of his friends, laughing while I sat there burning with shame. "At least I'm feeding her well," he would say with a smirk as his friends chuckled uncomfortably. "Can't say I'm not providing for my wife." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that he was the reason I had gained so much weight, that his control and manipulation and cruelty had driven me to food as my only source of comfort. But I could not find the words. They were buried too deep beneath the layers of pain and shame I had been carrying for so long. The breaking point came when I was 7 months pregnant and Richard decided he wanted me to go grocery shopping with him. He usually preferred to go alone, but that day he insisted I come along. I should have known something was wrong. I should have trusted my instincts, but I was so desperate for any kind of connection with him, so hungry for a moment of normalcy, that I agreed. We drove to the fresh market in silence. Richard did not speak to me the entire way there, and I did not try to start a conversation. I had learned by then that silence was safer than saying the wrong thing and setting him off. I grabbed a cart and started walking through the aisles, checking off items from the list Richard had given me. Milk, eggs, bread, chicken breasts, vegetables. Everything was practical, healthy, boring. But as I turned down the frozen food aisle, I saw them. Pints of ice cream on sale. My favorite flavor, butter pecan, was right there in front of me, practically calling my name. I hesitated. Richard had told me to stick to the list, but I was 7 months pregnant. I was exhausted and emotional and desperate for something that would make me feel even a tiny bit happy. So I grabbed 2 pints of ice cream and put them in the cart along with a box of chocolate chip cookies I found on the next aisle. I knew it was a mistake the moment I did it, but it was too late to put them back. When we got to the checkout line, Richard saw the extra items. His jaw tightened and I could see the anger building in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. He waited until we were outside, loading the groceries into the trunk of his car in the parking lot, when he exploded.
And that is when everything I've already told you happened. That is when he tore me apart in front of strangers, when he told me I was disgusting and embarrassing and pathetic. That is when I felt the eyes of everyone around us burning into my skin. That is when I saw that black luxury car with the tinted windows and wondered if someone inside was watching this nightmare unfold. That is when I realized I couldn't keep living like this. But what could I do? I was 7 months pregnant with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I was trapped in a marriage that had become a prison, married to a man who had made it his mission to destroy every last piece of my self-worth. As we drove home that day in silence, I stared out the window and felt something shift inside me. A tiny spark of defiance that I had thought was long dead. A small voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "You deserve better than this." I did not know what would come next. I didn't know how I would survive, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Something had to change. I could not keep living like this. I could not bring my baby into this toxic environment. I had to find a way out, even if I had no idea what that way out looked like.
Little did I know that the answer to my prayers was closer than I thought. Little did I know that someone had been watching me, not with judgment like all those strangers in the parking lot, but with concern. Someone who would soon change everything. But that part of my story would have to wait. First, I had to survive the next few months. First, I had to find the strength to stand up for myself when I had been knocked down so many times I had forgotten what it felt like to stand tall. The drive home felt like it took forever. Richard did not say a single word to me, and I was grateful for the silence, even though it was heavy and suffocating. When we finally pulled into the driveway of our small rental house on the outskirts of Houston, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. This house that was supposed to be our home had become a place of misery, a constant reminder of everything I had lost. Richard got out of the car without waiting for me and went straight inside, leaving me to carry all the groceries by myself. My 7-month pregnant belly made it difficult to move, and my feet were so swollen they felt like they might burst out of my shoes. But I managed to gather the bags and waddle into the house, my breath coming in short gasps by the time I reached the kitchen. I put the groceries away in silence, my hands shaking as I tried to organize everything in the refrigerator and pantry. The ice cream and cookies I had bought were still in one of the bags, and I hesitated before putting them away. Part of me wanted to throw them in the trash, to prove to Richard that I could be disciplined, that I could follow his rules. But another part of me, that tiny spark of defiance, refused to give him that satisfaction. So I put them away in the freezer and the cabinet, right where they belonged. Richard was in the living room watching television when I finished. I walked in and sat down on the far end of the couch, as far away from him as I could get. He did not even glance at me. It was like I did not exist. "I am sorry," I said quietly, breaking the silence. He turned to look at me then, his expression cold and unreadable. "Sorry for what, Amara? Sorry for embarrassing me in public? Sorry for not being able to control yourself? Sorry for turning into someone I do not even recognize anymore?" The words hit me like punches, each one landing squarely in my chest and knocking the air out of my lungs. But I refused to cry. I had done enough crying for one day. "I am sorry for not sticking to the list," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted something to make me feel a little better. That is all." Richard laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You want to feel better? Maybe you should try exercising instead of eating your feelings all the time. Maybe you should try taking care of yourself instead of using pregnancy as an excuse to let yourself go completely." I couldn't respond to that. What was there to say? He had made up his mind about me, and nothing I did or said would change it. We sat there in silence for the rest of the evening, two people sharing a house, but living in completely different worlds. When it was time for bed, I went to our bedroom alone while Richard stayed up watching television.
He had started sleeping on the couch most nights, claiming he couldn't get comfortable in bed with me taking up so much space. I knew that was just another one of his excuses to avoid being near me, but I didn't argue. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of trying to make him love me again. That night, as I lay in bed with my hand on my belly, feeling my baby kick and turn, I made a promise to myself and to my unborn child. I promised that I would find a way to give this baby a better life than the one I was living. I promised that I would not let Richard's cruelty define who I was. I promised that someday, somehow, I would find my way back to the confident woman I used to be. But I had no idea how I would keep that promise. I had no idea where to even start. The next few weeks passed in a blur of loneliness and humiliation. Richard barely spoke to me except to criticize something I had done wrong. He worked long hours and came home late most nights, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. I knew he was probably seeing someone else, but I didn't have the energy to confront him about it. What would be the point? He had already made up his mind about me. I spent my days cleaning the house from top to bottom, cooking meals that Richard barely touched, and watching television to pass the time. Sometimes I would sit in the nursery we had set up for the baby, staring at the empty crib and wondering what kind of mother I would be. Would I be strong enough to protect my child from the kind of pain I was experiencing? Would I be able to teach my baby to be confident and self-assured when I had lost all sense of those things myself? The stress of it all was taking a toll on my body. I had started having contractions, false alarms that would send me into a panic before they subsided. My blood pressure was higher than it should be, according to the doctor I saw at my prenatal appointments. She had warned me that I needed to find ways to reduce my stress, or I could put myself and the baby at risk. But how was I supposed to reduce stress when my entire life was one giant source of stress? I tried talking to Richard about it, tried explaining that I needed his support now more than ever, but he just brushed me off, told me I was being dramatic, that plenty of women handled pregnancy just fine without falling apart the way I was. Maybe if you took better care of yourself, you wouldn't be having so many problems. Maybe you should stop eating everything in sight and actually try to be healthy. Maybe you wouldn't be at risk. His words were like poison, seeping into my mind and heart and making me believe that everything was my fault, that I was the problem, that if I could just be different, be better, be thinner, then maybe he would love me again. But I was starting to realize something important, something that would take me a long time to fully understand and accept. It wasn't about me. It had never been about me. Richard's cruelty had nothing to do with my weight or my appearance or anything I had done wrong. It was about control. It was about breaking me down completely that I would never question him, never challenge him, never try to leave him. He had isolated me from my job, friends, family, so that I would be completely dependent on him. He had made me believe I was worthless so that I would think I was lucky to have him, that no one else would ever want me. But knowing that didn't make it any easier to escape. If anything, it made me feel even more trapped because I realized just how calculated his abuse had been. This was not something that happened by accident. This was something he had planned from the very beginning. The day everything started to change was a Tuesday afternoon about 2 weeks after the parking lot incident. I had woken that morning with a strange feeling in my chest, like something significant was about to happen. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was being silly, but the feeling persisted throughout the day. Richard had left for work early that morning without saying goodbye, which was normal by that point. I spent the morning cleaning the kitchen and doing laundry, trying to keep myself busy so I wouldn't have time to think about how miserable I was. But by noon, I was exhausted and hungry, and I realized we were running low on groceries. I didn't want to go to the store. The thought of being in public, of having people stare at my pregnant belly and judge me, made my stomach turn with anxiety. But we needed food, and Richard would be angry if he came home to an empty refrigerator. So I grabbed my purse, slipped on my shoes, and drove to the same fresh market where the humiliation had happened 2 weeks earlier. My hands were trembling as I pulled into the parking lot, and I had to take several deep breaths before I could force myself to get out of the car. The store was not too crowded, which was a relief. I grabbed a cart and started making my way through the aisles, checking off items from the mental list I had made. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, just wanting to get in and out as quickly as possible. I was in the produce section examining a display of apples when I heard a voice behind me. Amara Johnson. I froze. No one had called me by my maiden name in years. Slowly, I turned around and my breath caught in my throat when I saw who was standing there. It was Caleb Monroe, my best friend from high school back in North Carolina. He looked different than I remembered. Older, more mature, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. But his eyes were the same warm brown I remembered, and his smile was just as genuine as it had been all those years ago. "Oh my God," he said, his smile fading as he took in my appearance. "It is you. I almost did not recognize you." I felt heat rush to my cheeks. Of course he almost did not recognize me. I was nearly 100 pounds heavier than the last time he had seen me, and I was 7 months pregnant. I probably looked like a completely different person. "Hi, Caleb," I managed to say, my voice coming out shaky and uncertain. "Wow, it has been a long time." "It has been too long," he said, his eyes scanning my face with concern. "How have you been? What are you doing in Houston?" I opened my mouth to answer, to give him some generic response about how I was fine, how life was great, how I could not be happier, but the words would not come out. Instead, to my absolute horror, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I started, then stopped. I could not do this. I could not break down in the middle of a grocery store in front of someone I had not seen in years. But Caleb saw my distress. He moved closer, his hand reaching out like he wanted to comfort me, but was not sure if he should. "Amara, are you okay? You do not look okay." And that was all it took. Those simple words, spoken with genuine concern, broke through the wall I had built around my emotions. The tears started falling before I could stop them, and suddenly I was crying in the produce section of the fresh market, while my old friend from high school looked at me with alarm and worry. "I'm sorry," I gasped, trying to wipe away my tears with the back of my hand. "I'm so sorry. I'm fine. I'm just having a rough day." "You're not fine," Caleb said firmly, "and you do not have to pretend with me. We were best friends once, remember? I can tell when something is seriously wrong." His words made me cry even harder. I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone actually care about my well-being, to have someone look at me with concern instead of disgust. It had been so long since anyone had treated me with basic human kindness that I didn't know how to handle it. Caleb gently took my arm and guided me away from the produce section, away from the few shoppers who were starting to stare at the crying pregnant woman. He led me to a quiet corner near the back of the store where there were fewer people, and he handed me a clean handkerchief from his pocket. "Here," he said softly. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." I wiped my tears and tried to compose myself, but it was difficult. Everything I had been holding inside for so long was threatening to pour out, and I was terrified of what would happen if I let it. What if Caleb judged me? What if he thought I was weak or pathetic? What if he walked away like everyone else had? But when I finally looked up at him, all I saw in his eyes was compassion. "I'm sorry," I said again, my voice hoarse from crying. "I must think I'm crazy, breaking down like this." "I don't think you're crazy at all," Caleb said. "I think you're someone who is going through something difficult and needs someone to talk to. And I'm here, Amara. If you want to talk, I'm here to listen." Something about the way he said it, so genuine and sincere, made me want to tell him everything. But I was afraid of what he would think, afraid of what Richard would do if he found out I had been talking to another man, afraid of admitting out loud just how bad things had gotten. It's complicated, I said quietly. Most things worth talking about are, Caleb replied with a small smile. Look, I have some time right now. Why don't we go grab a coffee or something? You look like you could use a break from grocery shopping, and I would really love to catch up with you. It has been, 10 years? 11, I corrected automatically. It has been 11 years since we last saw each other. 11 years? He repeated in disbelief. That's way too long. Come on, there's a coffee shop right across the street. My treat. I hesitated. Richard would be angry if he knew I had gone anywhere besides the grocery store. But then again, Richard was always angry at me these days anyway. What difference would it make? Okay, I heard myself say, just for a little while. We left our shopping carts where they were and walked out of the fresh market together. Caleb held the door open for me, and I felt a strange flutter in my chest at the simple gesture. Richard never held doors open for me anymore. He barely acknowledged my presence most of the time. The coffee shop was small and cozy, with comfortable chairs and soft music playing in the background. Caleb insisted on ordering for both of us, and he came back to our table with the decaf latte for me and a regular coffee for himself. I figured decaf was probably better for the baby, but if you want something else, just let me know. This is perfect, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. Thank you. We sat in silence for a moment, and I could feel Caleb watching me, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, he spoke. So, tell me what's been going on with you, Amara. The last time I saw you, you were about to start college in North Carolina. We had plans to stay in touch, but then life got busy and we lost contact. I've thought about you over the years, wondered how you were doing, but I never imagined I'd run into you in Houston, of all places. I took a sip of my latte, buying myself some time to figure out how to answer. Where did I even start? A lot has changed since high school, I said carefully. My mom passed away about 5 years ago, cancer. After she was gone, I just needed to get away from North Carolina, from all the memories. So I moved to Houston and started working as a medical assistant at a clinic. That's where I met my husband, Richard. We got married about 4 years ago, and now here I am, 7 months pregnant with our first child. I tried to make it sound like a happy story, like my life had turned out exactly the way I always dreamed, but even I could hear the emptiness in my voice. Caleb was quiet for a moment, studying my face. I'm so sorry about your mom, he said finally. She was an amazing woman. I know how close you two were. Thank you, I whispered, feeling fresh tears threaten to fall. I had not allowed myself to grieve my mother properly because Richard had always dismissed my sadness as me being overly emotional. And congratulations on the baby. That's exciting news. You must be thrilled. I nodded, but I couldn't quite meet his eyes. Yeah, it's exciting.
Amara, Caleb said gently, leaning forward in his chair. I do not mean to pry, but I have to ask, are you happy? Because from where I am sitting, you do not look like someone who is happy. You look like someone who is carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. His words broke through my defenses. I felt the tears start again, and this time I did not try to stop them. No, I admitted, my voice breaking. I am not happy. I have not been happy in a very long time. And then, before I could stop myself, everything came pouring out. I told Caleb about how Richard had seemed so perfect at first, how he had told me he loved my body and made me feel beautiful. I told him about how Richard had convinced me to quit my job, how he had isolated me from everyone I cared about, how he had systematically destroyed my confidence and self-worth. I told him about the cruel comments, the public humiliation, the way Richard treated me like I was nothing more than a burden he had to carry. I told him everything, except the part about being afraid, because I was not ready to admit out loud just how scared I was of my own husband. Caleb listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail I shared.
When I finally finished talking, I felt exhausted, but also strangely relieved. It had been so long since I had been able to tell anyone the truth about what my life had become. "Amara," Caleb said, his voice tight with anger, "what you are describing is not a marriage. That is control. That is manipulation. Your husband is toxic, and you do not deserve to be treated that way. No one deserves to be treated that way." "I know," I said quietly, "but I don't know what to do about it. I have no job, no money, no place to go. I am 7 months pregnant with his child. I am trapped." "You are not trapped," Caleb said firmly. "There are always options, even when it does not feel like it. But right now, the most important thing is that you know you are not alone anymore. I am here, and I'm going to help you figure this out." I looked at him in surprise. "Why would you do that? We have not seen each other in 11 years. You do not owe me anything." Caleb smiled sadly. "Because we were best friends once, and that still means something to me. Because I can see that you are hurting, and I have the ability to help. And honestly, because I care about you, Amara. I always have." There was something in the way he said those last words that made my heart skip a beat, but I did not have time to analyze what it meant because Caleb was already pulling out his phone. "Here," he said, opening his contacts. "Give me your number. I want to be able to check on you, make sure you're okay. And if you ever need anything at all, you call me. Do not hesitate. Promise me." I hesitated for only a moment before rattling off my phone number. Caleb typed it into his phone and then called me so I would have his number too. "There," he said. "Now we are officially back in touch. And Amara, I mean what I said. If you need me, day or night, you call. I will be there." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I could not remember the last time someone had offered to help me with no strings attached, no expectations, no ulterior motives. It felt too good to be true. We talked for a while longer, catching up on the years we had missed. Caleb told me that he had gone to business school after high school and had been working in investments and real estate. He did not go into specifics about his work, and I did not push. I was just grateful to have someone to talk to who actually listened to what I had to say. When I finally looked at my phone, I realized I had been gone for almost 2 hours. Panic flooded through me. Richard would be furious if he came home and I was not there with dinner ready. "I have to go," I said, standing up quickly. Too quickly. The room spun for a moment, and I had to grab the edge of the table to steady myself. Caleb was on his feet immediately, his hand on my arm to support me. "Are you okay? Maybe you should sit back down for a minute." "I'm fine," I insisted, even though I was not fine at all. I just stood up too fast, but I really do need to get home. My husband will be expecting dinner. Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he walked me back across the street to the grocery store, where my abandoned cart was still sitting in the produce section. We finished shopping together, and Caleb insisted on paying for everything despite my protests. "Consider it a gift from an old friend," he said as he handed me the bags. "And remember what I said. You call me if you need anything." "I will," I promised, though I wasn't sure if I would actually follow through. What if Richard found out? What if he got angry? But as I drove home with Caleb's number saved in my phone, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Just a tiny spark of it, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, things did not have to stay this way forever. When I got home, Richard was already there, sitting on the couch with his arms crossed and an angry expression on his face. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I got home an hour ago, and you were not here. What took you so long?" "The store was crowded," I lied, setting the grocery bags down on the kitchen counter. "And then I had to wait in a long checkout line. I'm sorry." Richard got up and walked into the kitchen, looking through the bags like he was inspecting them for evidence of wrongdoing. I held my breath. terrified he would somehow know that I had spent the last 2 hours with another man. But he just grunted and walked away, leaving me to put everything away by myself. I waited until he was back in the living room before I let out the breath I had been holding. That night, as I lay in bed alone, I pulled out my phone and looked at Caleb's contact information. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend our conversation had never happened, to go back to the safe numbness I had been living in, but another part of me, that tiny spark of defiance, refused. I saved his number under a fake name, just in case Richard ever looked through my phone. And then I sent a quick text message. "Thank you for today. It meant more to me than you know." His response came almost immediately. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I ran into you. Get some rest and remember I'm here if you need me." I stared at those words for a long time before finally putting my phone away and closing my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was not completely alone in this world. Over the next few weeks, Caleb and I started texting regularly. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversations that reminded me of our high school days when we would talk for hours about everything and nothing. He would check in on me every day, asking how I was feeling, if I needed anything, if Richard was treating me okay. I was careful to only text him when Richard was at work or otherwise occupied. I would delete our conversations immediately after they ended, just to be safe. I knew I was being paranoid, but I could not shake the feeling that if Richard found out I was talking to another man, even just as a friend, he would make my life even more miserable than it already was.
But talking to Caleb gave me something to look forward to each day. He made me laugh with funny stories about his work. He encouraged me when I was feeling down. He reminded me that I was more than just the failure Richard had convinced me I was. "You are strong, Gamara," he texted me one afternoon. "Stronger than you give yourself credit for. You have been through so much, and you are still standing. That takes real courage." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that I was strong and courageous. But most days, I just felt weak and defeated. About 3 weeks after our first meeting, Caleb asked if we could meet up again. He said he had something important he wanted to talk to me about, something that might help improve my situation. I was nervous about meeting him again, worried that Richard would somehow find out, but I was also curious. What could Caleb possibly want to talk to me about that would help? We met at the same coffee shop on a Thursday afternoon when I knew Richard would be at work for several more hours. Caleb was already there when I arrived, sitting at the same table we had used before. He stood up when he saw me and pulled out my chair, that same gentleman's gesture that Richard had stopped doing years ago. "Thank you for coming," Caleb said as I sat down. "I was not sure if you would." "I almost did not," I admitted. "I am taking a big risk meeting you like this. If my husband found out—" "He will not find out," Caleb assured me. "I promise. And what I want to talk to you about, I think it might be worth the risk." I took a sip of the decaf latte he had already ordered for me and waited for him to continue. "I have been thinking a lot about your situation," Caleb began, "about how you have no income of your own, no independence, and I had an idea. What if I helped you start your own business? Something you could do from home, something that would give you financial freedom without your husband knowing about it right away." I stared at him in confusion. "A business? Caleb, I appreciate the thought, but I do not have any money to start a business. And even if I did, Richard would never allow it. He barely lets me leave the house anymore." "I know. That is why I would be the one providing the startup capital, and we would keep it completely secret. You wouldn't have to tell Richard anything until you were ready, until you felt safe enough to leave, if that is what you decided to do." I shook my head. "I could not ask you to do that. It's too much. You would be investing money in something that might not even work." "You are not asking," Caleb said firmly. "I am offering, and I have faith that it will work because I know how talented and capable you are.
Do you remember in high school how good you were at doing makeup? How everyone used to come to you before dances and special events because you had that natural talent? I did remember. Makeup had been a passion of mine back then. I used to love experimenting with different looks, helping my friends feel beautiful, but I hadn't thought about that in years. Richard had made me feel so self-conscious about my appearance that I had stopped wearing makeup altogether, except for rare occasions. That was a long time ago, I said quietly. Talent doesn't just disappear, Caleb insisted, and the beauty industry is huge right now. Online beauty businesses are booming. You could start small, maybe selling makeup products or offering virtual makeup consultations. Build it up slowly while Richard is at work. By the time he realizes what you're doing, you already have your own income, your own independence. The idea was tempting, more than tempting. It was like Caleb was offering me a lifeline when I had been drowning for so long. But I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of what Richard would do if he found out. Scared of hoping for something better, only to have it all fall apart. I don't know, I said, my voice uncertain. It sounds amazing, but it also sounds impossible. Caleb reached across the table and took my hand. It was the first time he had touched me beyond a supportive hand on my arm, and the contact sent a jolt of something through me, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Nothing is impossible, Amara, he said, looking directly into my eyes. Not when you have someone who believes in you. And I believe in you. I always have. There was that intensity in his voice again, that hint of something deeper than just friendship. But I couldn't let myself think about what that might mean. I was a married woman, pregnant with my husband's child. Whatever Caleb was offering, it had to stay purely friendship and business. Nothing more. Okay, I heard myself say. Okay, let's try it. But Caleb, if this doesn't work, if I lose your money, I don't know how I would ever pay you back. You don't need to worry about paying me back, Caleb said with a smile. Consider it an investment in someone I care about. And trust me, I have faith this is going to work. Over the next few weeks, Caleb and I worked together in secret to set up my beauty business. He helped me create an online store, registered the business under a name that wasn't connected to me directly, and provided the initial investment for inventory. We communicated entirely through encrypted messaging apps that I would delete from my phone every time we finished talking. I started small, selling affordable makeup products and offering virtual makeup consultations for women who wanted help finding the right looks for their face shape and skin tone. Caleb helped me market the business through social media, and to my absolute shock, it started to gain traction almost immediately. Women loved the personal attention I gave them. They loved that I was honest about what would and wouldn't work for them. They loved that I made them feel beautiful without trying to sell them products they didn't need. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon I had a steady stream of customers. The money started coming in. Not a lot at first, but enough to make me realize that I was actually good at this. I was building something real, something that was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose beyond being Richard's wife. But I had to be incredibly careful. I only worked on the business when Richard was at work or asleep. I had all the inventory shipped to a P.O. box that Caleb had set up for me, and I would pick up packages when I was supposedly running errands. I deposited all the money into a separate bank account that Richard didn't know about, slowly building up my financial safety net. Caleb was my lifeline through all of it. He coached me through difficult customer interactions, celebrated my successes with me, and encouraged me when I felt like giving up. We talked every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and I found myself looking forward to those conversations more than anything else in my life. You are doing amazing, he would tell me. Your sales are growing every week. At this rate, you'll have enough saved up to support yourself and the baby within a few months. The thought of actually leaving Richard, of being able to stand on my own 2 feet, both terrified and excited me. Part of me still clung to the hope that maybe he would change, that maybe he would become the man I thought I had married. But deep down, I knew that man either never existed or was so deeply buried beneath layers of cruelty that there was no getting him back. And as my business grew, so did my confidence. I started to remember what it felt like to be good at something, to be valued for my skills and knowledge. I started to see glimpses of the woman I used to be, the confident woman who had not been afraid to take up space in the world. But Richard noticed the change in me, and he did not like it.
"You seem different lately," he said one evening as I was making dinner. "More distracted. What are you up to?" My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I am not up to anything. I am just tired. Pregnancy is exhausting." He studied me with suspicious eyes. "You better not be doing anything behind my back, Amara. I provide for you, I take care of you, and I expect loyalty in return." The irony of him talking about loyalty when I was almost certain he was having an affair was not lost on me. But I did not say anything. I just nodded and went back to cooking, hoping he would drop the subject. But Richard did not drop it. Over the next few weeks, he became increasingly paranoid and controlling. He started checking my phone when I was in the shower, going through my call logs and messages. Thankfully, I had been careful to delete everything related to Caleb and the business, so there was nothing for him to find. He also started coming home at random times during the day, like he was trying to catch me doing something I was not supposed to be doing. I would have to quickly hide my laptop and pretend I had just been watching television or cleaning the house. The stress of living this double life was taking its toll on me. My blood pressure was getting higher and I was having more frequent contractions. My doctor warned me again that I needed to reduce my stress levels, but how could I do that when every moment of every day was filled with tension and fear? And then, about 6 weeks after I had started the business, something happened that changed everything. Richard announced that he wanted to take me out to dinner. It was completely unexpected. He had not wanted to be seen in public with me in months, but he insisted, said he wanted to celebrate because he had just gotten a big commission at work. I was suspicious, but I also could not refuse without making him angry. So I put on one of the few maternity dresses I own that still fit me, did my makeup for the first time in weeks, and tried to ignore the sense of dread that was building in my stomach. Richard took me to an upscale restaurant in downtown Houston, the kind of place we never went to because he said I would embarrass him. But that night, he was playing the role of devoted husband, pulling out my chair, ordering wine for himself and water for me, even complimenting my dress. "You look nice tonight," he said, though the compliment felt hollow. "It is good to see you making an effort with your appearance." I did not respond to the backhanded nature of the compliment. I just smiled and thanked him, trying to enjoy the novelty of being out of the house. But about halfway through dinner, I realized why Richard had really brought me here. A woman walked into the restaurant. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with long hair and a figure that Richard would definitely approve of. She was wearing a tight dress that showed off every curve, and she walked with the kind of confidence I had lost years ago. Richard's eyes followed her across the restaurant, and I felt my stomach drop when she walked straight to our table. "Richard," she said with a bright smile, completely ignoring me. "I thought that was you. What a coincidence running into you here." Tasha. So that was her name. The woman Richard had been seeing behind my back, the woman whose perfume I had been smelling on his clothes for months. What a surprise. I did not know you came to this place. "Oh, I love this restaurant. And you must be Amara. Richard has told me so much about you."
I bet he has, I thought bitterly. I could only imagine what he had said about me to his mistress. Probably that I was a burden, an embarrassment, someone he was stuck with because I was pregnant with his child. "It's nice to meet you," I said, forcing the words out, even though I wanted to scream. Tasha smiled sweetly, but there was venom behind it. "Richard, I should let you get back to your dinner. But call me later, okay? We still need to finalize those plans we were talking about." "Of course," Richard said, his hand lingering on her arm just a moment too long. I watched Tasha walk away, feeling like I had just been punched in the stomach. Richard sat back down and picked up his fork like nothing had happened, like he had not just openly flaunted his affair in front of his pregnant wife. "She seems nice," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Tasha is a colleague from work. We work on some projects together. That is all." "Do you think I'm stupid?" I said, my voice rising slightly. "Do you think I don't know what's going on between you two?" His expression hardened. "Keep your voice down, Amara. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" I said incredulously. "You just introduced me to your mistress in the middle of a restaurant and you're worried about me making a scene?" "You're being dramatic," he hissed. "Tasha is not my mistress. She is a friend. And even if she was, maybe you should ask yourself why I will need to look elsewhere. Maybe you should look in a mirror and realize that you have let yourself go so completely that I can barely stand to be around you anymore." His words were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. But instead of making me cry like they usually did, they made me angry. Angry at Richard for treating me this way. Angry at myself for allowing it to happen. Angry at the entire situation I have found myself trapped in. "Take me home," I said, pushing my plate away. "Right now." "We haven't even finished dinner," he protested. "I don't care. I want to go home now." The drive home was silent, thick with tension. I could feel Richard's anger radiating off of him, but I didn't care anymore. I was too busy trying to process what had just happened, trying to figure out how to move forward from this. When we got home, Richard went straight to the bedroom and slammed the door. I stood in the living room, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. And then I did the only thing I could think to do. I pulled out my phone and texted Caleb. "I need to talk to you. Can you call me?" His response came immediately. "Calling now." When my phone rang, I stepped outside into the backyard where Richard wouldn't hear me and answered. "What happened?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. And I told him everything. About the dinner, about meeting Tasha, about Richard's cruel words. I told him that I was done trying to save a marriage that had been dead for years. I told him I was ready to start planning my exit, that I needed to focus on building my business so I could support myself and my baby without Richard's help.
"I am so sorry you had to go through that," Caleb said when I finished. "But Amara, I am also proud of you. You are finally standing up for yourself. You are finally realizing that you deserve better than what he has been giving you." "I just feel so stupid," I said, tears streaming down my face. "How did I let it get this bad? How did I lose myself so completely?" "You did not lose yourself," Caleb said firmly. "You are still in there. And now you are finding your way back. It is going to be okay, Amara. I promise you, it is going to be okay. We talked for almost an hour, making plans for how to accelerate the growth of my business, how to build up my savings faster so I could leave sooner. Caleb offered to increase his investment to help me scale up operations so I could make more money in less time. I want you out of that toxic environment as soon as possible, he said, especially with the baby coming in just a few more weeks. You need to be somewhere safe, somewhere you can focus on being a mother without constantly worrying about Richard's abuse. When I finally hung up and went back inside, I felt different. Stronger, more determined than I had felt in years. I was done being a victim. I was done letting Richard control my life. I was going to fight for myself and my baby, no matter what it took. But I had no idea how much harder things were about to get before they got better. The next few weeks were the most challenging of my entire pregnancy. Richard's behavior became increasingly erratic and hostile. He would come home late, reeking of perfume and alcohol, and then pick fights with me over the smallest things. He started withholding money, giving me less and less for groceries and household expenses, like he was trying to punish me for standing up to him at the restaurant. But I did not let it break me this time. Every day, while Richard was at work, I poured myself into my business. My sales continued to grow, and Caleb helped me expand into new product lines. We started offering beauty subscription boxes, which became incredibly popular. Within a few weeks, I was making more money than I ever had as a medical assistant. I opened a separate bank account in my name only and started transferring money there as quickly as I earned it. Every deposit felt like a step closer to freedom. Every dollar was proof that I could take care of myself and my baby without needing Richard. Caleb and I talked constantly, him encouraging me every step of the way. He helped me plan for what would come after the baby was born, how I would manage being a single mother while running a business. He assured me that I would not be alone, that he would be there to support me however I needed. You are going to get through this, he would tell me, and when you do, you are going to look back and be amazed at how strong you were. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as my due date approached, I felt my anxiety growing. What if something went wrong with the birth? What if Richard refused to let me leave after the baby was born? What if I was not strong enough to actually go through with it? And then, when I was 8.5 months pregnant, something happened that would change the course of everything. I had gone to the grocery store to pick up a few things. It was a Saturday afternoon and Richard had stayed home, claiming he did not feel well. I was grateful for the chance to get out of the house for a little while, to have a brief moment of peace away from his constant criticism and hostility. I was in the checkout line when I saw them, Richard and Tasha, walking into the store together. They were laughing, his arm around her waist in a way he had not touched me in years. They looked like a couple, a happy couple, the kind of couple Richard and I had never actually been. I felt my heart start to race as I watched them walk past me without even noticing I was there. They were so wrapped up in each other that they didn't see me standing just 20 feet away with my pregnant belly and my cart full of groceries. Part of me wanted to confront them right there. Part of me wanted to march over and demand to know what Richard thought he was doing, bringing his mistress to the same store where his pregnant wife was shopping. But another part of me, the part that was learning to be strategic, told me to stay quiet, to observe, to gather evidence. So I paid for my groceries and walked out to the parking lot, my hands trembling as I loaded the bags into my car. And that's when I saw it again. That same black luxury car with the tinted windows parked just a few spaces away from where Richard's car was. Something about that car made my skin prickle with awareness.
Who was inside? And why did I keep seeing it whenever something significant happened in my life? I was so distracted by the car that I didn't notice Richard and Tasha coming out of the store until it was too late. They walked right past my car, still laughing and touching each other like teenagers in love. Richard didn't even glance in my direction. He was too busy whispering something in Tasha's ear that made her giggle. And then Richard pulled away from Tasha and said something that made my blood run cold, even though I couldn't hear the words. I could only see his lips moving, see the way Tasha threw her head back and laughed like he had said the funniest thing in the world. But I could read his lips well enough to know what he had said. He said, "I can't wait until this is over. Once the baby is born, I'm done with her." He was talking about me. He was telling his mistress that he was going to leave me as soon as I gave birth to his child, that I was just an inconvenience he was waiting to be rid of. I sat there in my car, frozen, as Richard and Tasha drove away. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. All this time, I had been planning to leave him, but he was planning to leave me too. And worse, he was going to wait until I was at my most vulnerable, right after giving birth, when I would need support the most. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Richard was not just cruel, he was calculating. He had been planning this all along. The pregnancy was not a happy accident. It had been a trap, a way to keep me dependent on him, isolated and alone until he decided he was done with me. I don't know how long I sat there in that parking lot trying to process what I had just learned. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed to stand still as the reality of my situation crashed down on me like a tidal wave. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text message snapping me back to reality. It was Caleb. "How are you doing today? Just checking in?" I stared at the message for a long moment before my fingers started typing, almost of their own accord. I just saw Richard with his mistress. They were kissing in the parking lot. He doesn't even know I saw them. Caleb, I read his lips. He told her he's going to leave me as soon as the baby is born. The 3 dots appeared immediately, showing that Caleb was typing. Then my phone rang. "Where are you right now?" he asked the moment I answered, his voice tight with concern and anger. "I'm still in the parking lot at Fresh Market. I can't seem to make myself drive home." "Don't go home yet," Caleb said firmly. "Stay there. I'm coming to you. We need to talk about this face to face." "Caleb, you don't have to. I'm already on my way. Just stay where you are, please."
He hung up before I could protest further. I sat in my car, watching other shoppers come and go, living their normal lives, while mine was falling apart. About 15 minutes later, that black luxury car pulled into the parking lot and parked right next to me. My heart started racing. I had seen that car so many times, always appearing when something significant was happening, and now it was parking right next to me. The driver's door opened and I held my breath, waiting to see who would step out. It was Caleb. I stared in shock as he climbed out of the sleek black Mercedes that I had seen in this very parking lot the day Richard first humiliated me publicly. Caleb was wearing an expensive suit, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He looked every bit the successful businessman, but there was something more. Something that suddenly made me realize I did not know nearly as much about my old friend as I thought I did. He walked over to my car and opened my door, crouching down so he was at eye level with me. "That was you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "In the parking lot that day, when Richard humiliated me, you were there. You saw everything." Caleb's expression was pained. Yes, I saw everything. And it took every ounce of self-control I had not to get out of that car and confront him right there. But I knew that would only make things worse for you. "How long have you been watching over me?"
I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. Since the day I ran into you in the store and saw the pain in your eyes, Caleb admitted. I could not just walk away and pretend I had not seen what you were going through, so I started keeping an eye on you, making sure you were safe. I know it sounds like I was stalking you, and maybe I was in a way, but Amara, I was so worried about you. I needed to know you were okay. I should have been angry. I should have been upset that he has been following me without my knowledge, but instead, I felt something else entirely. I felt protected. For the first time in years, someone had actually cared enough about my well-being to make sure I was safe. Who are you really, Caleb? I asked, looking from him to the expensive car and back again. You said you worked in investments and real estate, but this is more than that, isn't it? Caleb sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Can we go somewhere more private to talk? There's a lot I need to tell you, and I don't want to do it in a parking lot. Part of me knew I should go home. Richard would be back eventually, and he would expect dinner to be ready. But I was so tired of living my life according to Richard's expectations and demands, so tired of putting his needs before my own. Okay, I said. Let's talk. Caleb helped me out of my car, his hand steadying me as I struggled to get my pregnant body out of the driver's seat. Follow me, he said. I know a place where we can talk privately. I followed his car for about 20 minutes until we arrived at a stunning high-rise building in the heart of downtown Houston. Caleb pulled into an underground parking garage, and I followed, my heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. He led me to a private elevator that required a key card to access. We rode up in silence, the tension thick between us. When the elevator doors opened, I found myself standing in the most beautiful penthouse apartment I had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. The furniture was modern and expensive. Everything about the place screamed wealth and success. "This is your home?" I asked, unable to hide my shock. "One of them," Caleb said, gesturing for me to sit down on the plush couch. "I also have places in New York and Los Angeles, but Houston is where I spend most of my time. It's where my main offices are." I sat down carefully, my mind reeling. "Caleb, what do you do? And please be honest with me this time." He sat down across from me and took a deep breath. "My full name is Caleb Monroe. I'm the founder and CEO of Monroe Investments, one of the largest investment firms in the country. We manage billions of dollars in assets for clients all over the world. I also own several real estate development companies and have investments in dozens of other businesses." I stared at him, trying to reconcile this information with the boy I had known in high school. "You're a billionaire," I said slowly. "Yes," he confirmed. "I am." "And you've been this successful since we lost touch?" "I built my company from the ground up over the past 11 years. I started with nothing but a business degree and a lot of ambition. I made some smart investments early on that paid off big, and I used that money to build an empire. But Amara, none of that success means anything compared to seeing you again and realizing you were trapped in such a terrible situation." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me who you were from the beginning? Why did you let me think you were just doing okay, working a normal job?" "Because I didn't want you to feel like there was a power imbalance between us. I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything or that I was only helping you because I had money. I wanted you to see that I cared about you as a person, as my friend from high school, not as some billionaire trying to play hero." "But you were playing hero. Talk. Can you remember senior year of high school? Right before graduation?" I thought back, trying to remember. "We were planning to go to different colleges. We promised to stay in touch." "Do you remember the night before graduation?" Caleb pressed. "We went to that park near your house and sat on the swings, talking about our futures." The memory came flooding back. Yes, I remember. We talked for hours about what we wanted out of life. I almost told you something that night, something I had been keeping inside for years. But I lost my nerve, and then you left for college, and I left for business school, and we lost touch, and I spent the next 11 years wondering what might have happened if I had been brave enough to tell you the truth. My heart was pounding. What truth?
That I was in love with you, Caleb said simply. I had been in love with you since sophomore year, but I was too scared to tell you because I did not want to ruin our friendship. And then you moved away, and I threw myself into building my business to try to forget about you. But I never did forget. I never stopped thinking about you, wondering where you were, hoping you were happy. I felt like I could not breathe. Caleb! I am not telling you this to complicate your life or to make you feel pressured, he said quickly. You are married and pregnant, and I respect that. I am telling you this because you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know that someone has loved you for who you truly are, not for what they could control or manipulate you into being. Richard made you feel worthless, but Amara, you are the most valuable person in my world. You always have been. Tears were streaming down my face now. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything, Caleb assured me. I just needed you to know. And regardless of how you feel about me, I am going to keep helping you. I am going to make sure you and your baby are safe and taken care of. That is a promise. I wanted to tell him that I had feelings for him too, that somewhere in the midst of all the chaos and pain of the past few months, I had started to see him as more than just a friend, but I could not. I was still married to Richard, still carrying Richard's child. No matter how I felt about Caleb, acting on those feelings would be wrong. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for everything. We sat together for a while longer, talking about plans for the future. Caleb showed me financial projections from my business that proved I would be able to support myself and my baby comfortably within a few months. He offered to help me find a safe place to live once I left Richard. He promised that he would be there every step of the way, supporting me however I needed. By the time I left his penthouse that evening, I felt stronger than I had in years. I felt like I finally had a real chance at building a better life for myself and my child. But I also felt conflicted, because despite everything Richard had done to me, despite how much he had hurt me, I was still legally his wife, and Caleb's confession had awakened in me feelings that I did not know how to handle, feelings that made me question everything I thought I knew about love and marriage and what I deserved. When I got home that night, Richard was already there, sitting on the couch with his arms crossed. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "You left for the grocery store 4 hours ago." "I ran into an old friend," I said, which was technically true. We got to talking and lost track of time. Richard's eyes narrowed. "What old friend?" "Someone from high school," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "It was nice to catch up." He did not look convinced, but he didn't push the issue. Instead, he just shook his head in disgust and went back to watching television, dismissing me entirely. I went to the bedroom and lay down, my hand on my belly as I felt the baby kick. Only a few more weeks, I told myself. Just a few more weeks until the baby comes, and then I can start planning my exit strategy in earnest. But fate had other plans. The next few days were tense. Richard was watching me more closely than ever, like he suspected I was hiding something. I was extra careful with my phone, deleting all messages from Caleb immediately after reading them. I only worked on my business when I was absolutely sure Richard would not come home unexpectedly. But the stress was getting to me. I could feel it in my body, in the constant ache in my lower back, in the way my hands and feet were swelling more than they should. My blood pressure was through the roof, and I was having contractions more frequently. My doctor had warned me at my last appointment that if I did not find a way to reduce my stress, I could go into premature labor. But how could I reduce stress when every moment of my life was filled with tension and fear? 4 days after my conversation with Caleb in his penthouse that evening, Richard announced that he was taking me to a company event. It was a celebration for the top salespeople at the car dealership where he worked, and spouses were expected to attend. "I need you to come and play the part of the supportive wife," Richard said coldly. "And for God's sake, try to make yourself look presentable. I do not want to be embarrassed in front of my colleagues."
The irony of him asking me to play the supportive wife when he had been openly cheating on me with Tanisha was almost funny, but I agreed to go because I didn't have the energy to fight with him. The event was being held at an upscale hotel downtown. I put on the only dress I owned that still fit my pregnant body, did my makeup the way I used to when I worked at the clinic, and tried to prepare myself mentally for an evening of pretending my marriage was not falling apart. When we arrived at the hotel, I immediately felt self-conscious, and all the other women were dressed in expensive cocktail dresses, their bodies slim and toned. I was 8.5 months pregnant and felt like a whale in comparison. Richard introduced me to a few of his colleagues, and I could see the judgment in their eyes as they looked at me. They were polite, but barely. Most of them seemed more interested in talking to Richard than acknowledging my existence. And then Tanisha arrived. She walked into the room wearing a stunning red dress that hugged every curve of her perfect body. Her hair was styled professionally, her makeup flawless. She looked like a model, and I looked like a pregnant woman who had given up on herself. Tanisha made a beeline for Richard, completely ignoring me as she touched his arm and laughed at something he said. I stood there feeling invisible, watching my husband interact with his mistress while I was right there beside him. "Excuse me," I said quietly, needing to get away before I broke down in tears. Richard barely acknowledged me as I walked away. I found the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, trying to hold back the sobs that were threatening to escape. How had my life become this nightmare? How had I allowed myself to be reduced to this? When I finally composed myself enough to leave the stall, I found Tanisha standing at the mirror, reapplying her lipstick. "Oh," she said when she saw me, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Amara, right?" "Yes," I said, moving to wash my hands at the sink. "You know, I have to say you're handling this whole situation very gracefully," she continued, never taking her eyes off her own reflection. "If I were in your position, I don't think I could stand to be in the same room as my husband's, well, you know." I turned to her, anger flaring in my chest. "What exactly is it that you want from me?" Tanisha smiled, but there was cruelty in her eyes. "I don't want anything from you. I just think you should know that Richard and I are serious. This is not just some fling. He loves me. He has told me so." "If he loves you so much, why is he still married to me?" I challenged, even though I knew the answer.
"Because of the baby," Tasha said matter-of-factly. "He does not want to look bad by leaving his pregnant wife, but once that baby is born, he is mine. He has already told me we are going to be together. You are just a temporary inconvenience." Her words confirmed what I had already suspected, but hearing them spoken out loud still hurt. "You can have him," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I do not want a man who is capable of treating someone the way he has treated me. So, congratulations, Tasha. You won the prize. I hope you enjoy it when he starts treating you the same way." I walked out of the bathroom before she could respond, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I needed to leave this event, needed to get away from Richard and Tasha and all these people who looked at me like I was nothing. But when I walked back into the main room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Richard was talking to a group of his colleagues, and I was close enough to hear what he was saying. "Honestly, I cannot wait for this pregnancy to be over," Richard was telling them with a laugh. "My wife has completely let herself go. I mean, she was always a bigger woman, but this is ridiculous. I can barely stand to look at her anymore." His colleagues laughed uncomfortably, not sure how to respond, but Richard kept going. "The worst part is, she has no idea that I'm planning to leave her. She actually thinks we're going to be this happy little family once the baby comes. It is almost sad how delusional she is." One of his colleagues noticed me standing there and tried to warn Richard, but it was too late. I had heard every word. "Richard," I said, my voice cutting through the conversation like a knife. He turned to look at me, and for just a moment I saw panic flash across his face. But then his expression hardened into anger. "How long have you been standing there?" he demanded. "Long enough. Long enough to hear you tell your friends how you cannot wait to leave me. Long enough to hear you laugh about how delusional I am for thinking you actually care about your own child." The room had gone silent. Everyone was staring at us, watching the drama unfold like we were characters in a television show. "Amara, you are making a scene,"
Richard said through gritted teeth. We will talk about this at home. No, I said, my voice rising. We are going to talk about it right now. You have been cheating on me for months. You have been planning to leave me. You have done everything you can to destroy my confidence and make me feel worthless. And you know what? I'm done. I'm done pretending that this marriage is something it is not. I'm done letting you treat me like I'm nothing. You are nothing, Richard spat back, his facade finally cracking completely. You are a fat, pathetic excuse for a wife. I did you a favor by marrying you back then. No one else would have wanted you. And once I leave you with that baby, you are going to realize just how worthless you really are. No man on earth would want a big single mother like you. The room gasped. Even his colleagues looked shocked by the cruelty of his words. But I did not let them break me. Not this time. I would rather be alone with my baby than spend one more day married to someone like you. You are the worthless one, Richard, not me. I turned to walk away, needing to get out of that room before I completely fell apart. But I had only taken a few steps when I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my abdomen. It was so intense that I doubled over, gasping. Amara, someone said, but their voice sounded far away. Another pain came, even worse than the first. I clutched my stomach, feeling wetness between my legs. My water had broken. The baby, I managed to gasp. Something is wrong. And then the pain became unbearable. I felt my legs give out beneath me, felt myself falling. The last thing I saw before everything went black was that black luxury car visible through the windows of the hotel and Caleb rushing through the doors towards me. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was white. White ceiling tiles, white walls, white sheets. The steady beep of a heart monitor filled the silence, and I could feel an IV in my arm. I was in a hospital. For a moment, I couldn't remember how I had gotten there. Then the memories flooded back. The company event, Richard's cruel words, Tasha's smirk, the confrontation, and then the pain. That terrible, stabbing pain that had brought me to my knees. My hand flew to my stomach, and my heart stopped. It was smaller, flatter. The tight, round belly that had been there for 8.5 months was gone. No, I whispered, tears immediately streaming down my face. No, no, no. The door to my hospital room opened, and a nurse walked in. She saw that I was awake and immediately came to my bedside, her expression gentle but sad. Miss Brooks, you are awake. How are you feeling? My baby, I choked out. Where is my baby? The nurse took my hand, and I knew from her expression that the news was not good. I'm so sorry. You went to premature labor due to extreme stress and high blood pressure. Your baby girl was born, but she was too early. Her lungs were not developed enough. The doctors did everything they could, but she only lived for about 20 minutes. I'm so sorry for your loss. The world shattered around me. My baby girl, my daughter, the child I had been carrying for 8.5 months, the child I had been planning my entire future around, was gone. She had lived for 20 minutes, and I had not even been conscious to meet her, to hold her, to tell her how much I loved her. The grief that consumed me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was deeper than the pain of losing my mother, more devastating than anything Richard had ever done to me. This was the loss of a part of myself, of my hopes and dreams, of the future I had been fighting so hard to build. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, until my chest ached and my throat was raw. The nurse stayed with me, holding my hand, letting me grieve without trying to console me with empty platitudes. There was nothing anyone could say that would make this better. After what felt like hours, the door opened again. This time, it was Caleb who walked in. His face was drawn with exhaustion and grief, his eyes red like he had been crying too. Amara, he said, his voice breaking. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and wrapped his arms around me, and I buried my face in his chest and cried even harder. She's gone. My baby is gone, and I never even got to meet her. I know, Caleb whispered, his own tears falling into my hair. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the grief washed over us in waves. Finally, when I had no more tears left to cry, Caleb pulled back and looked at me with such tenderness that it made my heart ache. The doctor said the stress caused your blood pressure to spike to dangerous levels. That's what triggered the premature labor. Amara, Richard's abuse, his cruelty, and his public humiliation of you at that event, it killed your daughter.
The words hit me like a physical blow. Richard had killed our baby. Not directly, not with his own hands, but through his systematic destruction of my mental and emotional well-being. Through his cruelty and manipulation and abuse, he had created an environment so toxic that my body had literally shut down under the stress. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Where is Richard?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "He left the hospital about an hour after they brought you in. He signed some papers, gave them his insurance information, and walked out. He has not been back since. That was 3 days ago." 3 days? I had been unconscious for 3 days, and my husband had not even bothered to stay and make sure I was okay? He had not been there when our daughter took her first and last breaths. He had not been there when I woke up devastated and alone. "He does not care," I said, the realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. He never cared. Not about me, not about the baby. We were just inconveniences to him. "He is a monster," Caleb said, anger flashing in his eyes. "And I swear to you, Amara, he is going to pay for what he has done. But right now, the most important thing is that you focus on healing, both physically and emotionally." Over the next few days, I stayed in the hospital while my body recovered from the trauma of giving birth and losing my daughter. Caleb never left my side. He slept in the uncomfortable chair next to my bed and held my hand when the grief became overwhelming, and made sure I ate even when I had no appetite. He also took care of all the arrangements for my daughter's funeral. I named her Grace because even though her time on this earth was brief, she had been a moment of grace in my life, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there could be beauty and hope. Richard did not attend the funeral. He did not even send flowers or a card. It was like his daughter had never existed. But I was not alone. Caleb stood beside me at the tiny graveside service, his hand in mine, as we said goodbye to the little girl who would never get to grow up. And in that moment of profound grief, I made a decision. I was done being a victim. I was done letting Richard or anyone else make me feel worthless. I was going to honor my daughter's memory by becoming the strong, confident woman I was meant to be. The woman I had been before Richard had systematically destroyed my sense of self. When I was released from the hospital a week after waking up, Caleb took me directly to his penthouse. I did not protest. I had no desire to go back to the house I had shared with Richard, the house where I had been so miserable for so long. "You are going to stay here while you recover," Caleb said firmly. "I have already had your things moved out of Richard's house. Everything you owned is now in the guest bedroom. You do not have to see him or talk to him ever again if you do not want to." "What about the divorce?" I asked quietly. "My lawyers are already handling it. Richard will not fight it. He is too worried about how it would look if people found out what he did. He is going to sign the papers and walk away, and you are going to be free of him." The word free felt foreign on my tongue. I had been trapped for so long that I had forgotten what freedom felt like. Over the next few months, I lived in Caleb's penthouse and focused on healing. Some days were harder than others. The grief would hit me out of nowhere, and I would break down crying, mourning the daughter I had lost and the future we would never have together. But Caleb was always there, supporting me,
reminding me that it was okay to grieve, that healing was not linear. He also insisted that I continue working on my beauty business, even though I did not feel like doing anything most days. "This business is yours," he told me. "You built it from nothing, and it is going to be your foundation for the future you deserve." So I threw myself into the work. I expanded my product line, hired a few employees to help with fulfillment, and started doing more virtual consultations. The business grew rapidly, far exceeding my expectations. Within 6 months, I was making more money than I ever thought possible. But Caleb had a bigger vision for me. One evening, about 8 months after I had lost Grace, Caleb asked me to sit down with him. He had a serious expression on his face, and I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach. "There was something I need to tell you. Something about your business that you do not know yet." My heart sunk. "What is it? Is something wrong? Are we losing money?" "No, nothing like that," Caleb assured me. "In fact, it's the opposite. Amara, your business is not just successful, it's incredibly successful. The profit margins are remarkable, and the growth trajectory is unlike anything I've seen in years. You have built something truly special." "Okay," I said slowly. "So what is it you need to tell me?" Caleb took a deep breath. "Do you remember when I first offered to help you start this business? I told you I would provide the startup capital as an investment." "Yes," I said, "and you have. You've been incredibly generous." What I didn't tell you was that the investment was not just from me personally. It was from Monroe Investments, my company. And because of the way the business was structured, you actually own a significant portion of Monroe Investments through your beauty business. I stared at him in confusion. "I don't understand. How do I own part of your company?" "When your mother passed away 5 years ago, she left you a small inheritance, right?" "Yes," I said, "about $50,000. But I used that money to help Richard with a down payment on our house. He said it was an investment in our future." Richard's expression darkened. "Richard lied to you. He never put that money toward a house. He spent it on himself. But here's the thing, Amara. Before your mother passed away, she had actually invested a small amount of money in Monroe Investments at my suggestion. We had stayed in touch over the years, your mother and I. She knew I was building something big, and she wanted to support me. But more importantly, she wanted to make sure you would be taken care of if anything ever happened to her." "My mother invested in your company?" "Yes," Caleb said gently. "And that investment has grown exponentially over the past 5 years. When I found you in that grocery store 8 months ago and saw what you were going through, I realized you had no idea about your mother's investment. Richard had never told you. He had probably been planning to claim it for himself eventually." "How much? How much is the investment worth now?" Caleb pulled out a folder and handed it to me. $25 million. I nearly dropped the folder. "What?" "Your mother's initial investment of $10,000 has grown to $25 million. And when I helped you start your beauty business, I structured it as a subsidiary of Monroe Investments, which means you now own an even larger percentage of the company. Amara, you're not just a successful business owner. You're a multi-millionaire. And with the way your business is growing, you will be worth even more in the next year."
I could not process what he was telling me. I had gone from having nothing, from being completely dependent on an abusive husband, to being worth millions of dollars. It did not seem real. "Why did you not tell me this before?" I asked. "Because I wanted you to build your confidence first," Caleb explained. I wanted you to see what you were capable of achieving on your own merit, not because of money. I wanted you to rediscover the strong, capable woman you were before Richard destroyed your self-esteem. And you have, Amara. You have become that woman again. Now you are ready to know the full truth. I looked down at the folder in my hands, at the financial statements that proved everything Caleb was saying was true. My mother had been watching over me even after her passing, making sure I would be okay. And Caleb had been protecting that investment, helping me build on it, ensuring I would have the freedom and independence I needed to escape my toxic marriage. I do not know what to say, I whispered. You do not have to say anything, Caleb replied, but I do have a proposal for you. I want you to become the public face of Monroe Investments' new wellness and beauty division. You already have the business expertise, the passion, and the talent. I want to help you take what you have built and scale it nationally. We could launch in major cities across the country, create jobs, help other women feel beautiful and confident. You could turn your pain into purpose, Samara. The idea was overwhelming, but also thrilling. To take everything I had been through and use it to help other women, to create something meaningful and lasting. It felt like the right way to honor Grace's memory. I want to do it, I said firmly, but on one condition. Name it, Caleb said. I want part of our mission to be about promoting confidence and self-worth at any size, I said. I want to help women understand that their value is not determined by the number on a scale or the size of their clothes. I want to teach them what I had to learn the hard way, that true beauty comes from within, and confidence has nothing to do with meeting society's standards. Caleb smiled, his eyes shining with pride. I would not want it any other way. Over the next few months, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. Caleb and I developed a comprehensive business plan for the wellness and beauty division. We hired an incredible team of experts in marketing, product development, and operations. We scouted locations in major cities across the country for flagship stores. And through it all, I was transforming, not just professionally, but personally. I started taking care of myself in ways I had not done in years. I began exercising not to lose weight or meet anyone else's standards, but because it made me feel strong and capable. I started eating healthier, not as a form of punishment, but as a way of nourishing my body. I went to therapy to process the trauma of my marriage and the loss of my daughter. And yes, I did lose weight. About 60 pounds over the course of a year. But the weight loss was not the goal. It was simply a side effect of taking care of myself, of learning to love myself again, of releasing the pain and stress I had been carrying for so long. More importantly, I learned that my worth had never been tied to my weight. I learned that the confident woman I had been before Richard was still inside me, just waiting to be rediscovered. I learned that I deserved to be treated with respect and kindness, regardless of my size or appearance. I also learned that I had feelings for Caleb that went far beyond friendship, feelings that had been growing since the day he walked back into my life. But I was not sure if I was ready to act on those feelings. The wounds from my marriage to Richard were still healing, and I didn't want to rush into anything new before I was truly ready. Caleb seemed to understand. He never pushed me, never pressured me to be anything more than friends. But I could see in his eyes that his feelings had not changed, that he was willing to wait as long as it took for me to be ready. Exactly 1 year after I had lost Grace, Caleb asked me to accompany him to North Carolina for a business trip. Monroe Investments was opening a new office in Charlotte, and he wanted me to see it. This is where it all started for you, he said, as we flew first class on his private jet. I thought it would be fitting for you to see how far you have come. When we landed in Charlotte, I was nervous.
I hadn't been back to North Carolina since I moved to Houston 5 years earlier. This was where I grew up, where my mother had raised me, where I went to high school with Caleb. Coming back felt like closing a circle. Caleb had arranged for us to stay at the nicest hotel in the city. That evening, he told me he had a surprise for me. "There is someone I want you to meet tomorrow," he said mysteriously. The next morning, Caleb drove me to a stunning office building in downtown Charlotte. The sign outside read, "Monroe Investments Southeast Regional Office." "This is beautiful," I said as we walked inside. The lobby was modern and elegant with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in natural light. "This building is going to house our new Wellness and Beauty Division headquarters. This is where your team will be based as you expand across the Southeast." He led me to the elevator and we rode up to the top floor. When the doors opened, I gasped. The entire floor had been designed as a beauty and wellness center with consultation rooms, a photography studio, and a state-of-the-art product showroom. "Caleb, this is incredible," I breathed. "It's all for you," he said. "This is your empire, Amara. You built this." As we walked through the space, I felt a sense of pride I had never experienced before. This was mine. I had created this, not Richard, not anyone else. Me. I was standing in the main showroom when I heard a commotion coming from the hallway. Caleb checked his watch and smiled. Right on time. The door to the showroom opened, and a man in a janitor's uniform walked in, pushing a cleaning cart. He had his head down, focused on his work, and didn't notice us at first. But I recognized him immediately. It was Richard, my ex-husband, the man who had made my life a living nightmare, was working as a janitor in my building. He looked up and saw me, and the color drained from his face. His eyes widened in shock as he took in my appearance. I was wearing a tailored designer suit that fit my new, slimmer figure perfectly. My hair was styled professionally, my makeup flawless. I looked like the successful businesswoman I had become. Amara, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is that you?" "Hello, Richard," I said calmly. "It's been a while." He looks from me to Caleb and back again, confusion and shock written all over his face. "What are you doing here? And why are you with him?" "I work here," I said simply. "Actually, I own this building. Well, I own a significant portion of the company that owns this building. This is Caleb Monroe, CEO of Monroe Investments. And I'm the director of the Wellness and Beauty Division." "You own this building?" "Among others," Caleb interjected. "Ms. Brooks is one of the most successful executives in our company. She has built a multi-million-dollar business from the ground up." I watched as Richard processed this information, as he realized that the woman he had called worthless and pathetic was now his boss. The woman he had said no one else would want was now successful beyond anything he could ever achieve. The woman he had tried to destroy had risen from the ashes stronger than ever. "I do not understand," Richard stammered. When did you?" "It does not matter how or when," I said. "What matters is that I did it. Despite everything you put me through, despite losing our daughter because of your cruelty, despite hitting rock bottom, I found a way to build myself back up. And now I am here, and you are working as a janitor in my building." Richard's face twisted with a mixture of emotions: shock, anger, regret, and something that looked like shame. "Amara, save it," I interrupted. "I do not want or need your apologies. I do not need your excuses. I just need you to understand something.
You tried to break me. You tried to make me believe I was nothing without you. But you were wrong. I was always something, even when I could not see it myself. And now I am thriving while you are exactly where you deserve to be. Please, Richard said, and I was shocked to see tears in his eyes. Please, Amara, I know I was wrong. I know I treated you terribly. I have regretted it every day since you left. Tasha left me as soon as she realized I had no money. I lost my job at the dealership because word got around about what I did to you at that company event. I have been working as a janitor for the past 6 months just to make ends meet. I have lost everything. And whose fault is that? I asked, my voice hard. You made your choices, Richard. You chose to be cruel. You chose to cheat. You chose to put your own selfish desires above your pregnant wife and daughter. And now you are living with the consequences of those choices. I am sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I am so sorry. If I could go back and change everything, I would. I would treat you the way you deserve to be treated. I would. But you cannot go back, I said. None of us can. And honestly, Richard, I do not want or need your apologies. I do not need your excuses. I just need you to understand something. You tried to break me. You tried to make me believe I was nothing without you. But you were wrong. I was always something, even when I could not see it myself. And now I am thriving while you are exactly where you deserve to be. Did you lose the weight for him? Richard asked, gesturing at Caleb. Did you do all of this to prove something to another man? I stopped and turned back to face him, and for the first time in this entire conversation, I smiled. I did not lose weight for anyone but myself. And you want to know the truth, Richard? The weight loss wasn't even the important part. The important part was learning to love myself at any size, learning that my worth is not determined by the number on a scale or whether or not someone else finds me attractive. I am valuable because I am a human being with talents and dreams and purpose. That has always been true, whether I weighed 150 pounds or 250 pounds. But you did lose the weight, Richard insisted, like he was trying to claim some kind of victory. Yes, I did. Because I started taking care of myself. Because I started exercising and eating well and managing my stress in healthy ways. Because I started treating my body with the respect it deserves. But I did not do it to meet anyone else's standards. I did it for me. And that is the difference between us, Richard. You only ever saw me as an object to be judged and criticized. But I see myself as a whole person worthy of love and respect, regardless of my appearance. Richard opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand to stop him. We are done here, I said firmly. You will continue working as a janitor in this building because everyone deserves a chance to earn a living. But you will not speak to me unless it is absolutely necessary. You will not approach me. You will not try to manipulate or control me ever again. Is that understood? Richard nodded slowly, defeated. Understood. I turned and walked away from the showroom with Caleb by my side. As we stepped into the elevator, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had faced my past, confronted the man who had tried to destroy me, and walked away victorious, not because of revenge or spite, but because I had finally, truly freed myself from his hold over me. Are you okay? Caleb asked softly as the elevator descended. I am more than okay, I said, smiling. I am exactly where I am meant to be. That evening, Caleb took me to a beautiful restaurant overlooking the city. We sat on the outdoor patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I am proud of you, Caleb said, raising his glass in a toast, for everything you have accomplished, for the woman you have become, for the courage you showed today.
I couldn't have done any of it without you, I said honestly. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me the tools and support I needed to rebuild my life. Caleb, you saved me. You saved yourself, Caleb corrected gently, but I provided some help along the way. But Amara, there's something I need to tell you. My heart started beating faster. What is it? I told you a year ago that I was in love with you, and that has not changed. If anything, my feelings have only grown stronger as I have watched you overcome everything life has thrown at you. You are the most incredible woman I have ever known, and I would be honored if you would give me a chance to show you what real love looks like, the kind of love that builds you up instead of tearing you down, the kind of love that celebrates who you are instead of trying to change you. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were happy tears this time. I love you too, Caleb. I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you found me crying in that grocery store. You have shown me what it means to be truly valued and respected. You have never tried to change me or control me. You have only ever wanted me to be happy and whole. Caleb reached across the table and took my hand. So is that a yes? Will you give me a chance? Yes, I said, laughing through my tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He stood up and pulled me into his arms, and when he kissed me, I felt like I was finally home. Not in a place, but in a feeling. The feeling of being loved for exactly who I was, of being valued and cherished and respected. We dated for 6 months before Caleb proposed. He did it simply and privately, just the two of us, on the anniversary of the day that we had reconnected in that grocery store. He got down on one knee and asked me to spend the rest of my life with him, and I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small and intimate, held at a beautiful garden venue in Houston. We invited only our closest friends and family, and as I stood there in my wedding dress, a size 12, which I wore with pride and confidence, I thought about how far I had come. I thought about the broken woman I had been a year and a half earlier, trapped in a toxic marriage with no hope and no future. I thought about the daughter that I had lost and how her brief life had been the catalyst for me to finally find the strength to change my circumstances. I thought about every tear I had cried, every moment of pain I had endured, every time I had wanted to give up, but kept going anyway. And I realized that all of it, every single moment of suffering, had led me to this, to standing here with a man who truly loved me, building a life and career that brought me joy and fulfillment, living with confidence and purpose regardless of my size or appearance. I was not the same woman I had been when Richard had humiliated me in that parking lot. I was stronger, wiser, more resilient. I knew my worth now, and I would never again let anyone make me forget it. As Caleb and I exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of our lives, I felt my mother's presence and my daughter's spirit surrounding us. They had both played a role in bringing me to this moment, and I knew they would have been proud of the woman I had become.
After the wedding, Caleb and I went on a honeymoon to the Maldives. We spent 2 weeks relaxing on the beach, talking about our dreams for the future, and simply enjoying being together without any stress or pressure. When we returned to Houston, I threw myself back into my work with renewed energy. The wellness and beauty division continued to grow rapidly. We opened stores in 15 major cities across the country. We hired hundreds of employees, many of them women who had faced their own struggles with confidence and self-worth. We created a culture of empowerment and support, where everyone was valued for who they were, not what they looked like. I also started a foundation in Grace's name, dedicated to supporting women who were trying to escape domestic situations and rebuild their lives. We provided financial assistance, business training, therapy services, and mentorship. Every woman who came through our program was a reminder of who I had once been and how far I had come. One afternoon, about 2 years after Caleb and I had gotten married, I was giving a keynote speech at a women's empowerment conference in Charlotte.
I stood on that stage in front of hundreds of women, and I told them my story. I told them about Richard and the abuse I had endured. I told them about losing my daughter and hitting rock bottom. I told them about finding the courage to rebuild my life with Caleb's support. But most importantly, I told them the lessons I had learned. For so long, I believed that my worth was determined by my appearance, I said, my voice carrying through the auditorium. I believed that if I could just lose weight, just be smaller, just meet society's standards of beauty, then I would finally be valuable. Then I would finally deserve love and respect. But I was wrong. My worth was always there, inherent in who I was as a person. It had nothing to do with the size of my body. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces watching me intently. Yes, I did lose weight, and I am not going to lie and say that did not feel good. But the weight loss was not what saved me. What saved me was learning to love myself at any size, learning to treat my body with respect and care, not as a form of punishment, but as a form of self-love. Learning that true confidence comes from within, not from external validation. The women in the audience were nodding, many of them with tears in their eyes. They understood. They had been where I had been. So here is what I want you to take away from my story, I said. You are valuable right now, exactly as you are. Not when you lose 10 pounds, not when you fit into a certain size of jeans, not when someone else decides you are worthy. Right now, today, in this moment. You have inherent worth that no one can take away from you. The applause was deafening. After my speech, dozens of women came up to me, thanking me for sharing my story, telling me about their own struggles and triumphs. Each conversation reminded me why I did this work, why I had turned my pain into purpose. That evening, as Caleb and I drove back to our hotel, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past 2.5 years. So much had changed. So much had been lost and gained. Do you ever regret any of it? Caleb asked, as if reading my mind. Do you ever wish you could go back and change things? I thought about it for a long moment before answering. I regret that Grace did not get to live, I said honestly. I regret that she suffered because of Richard's cruelty. But do I regret the journey I have been on? Do I regret everything I learned about myself and my strength? No, I do not. Because that journey made me who I am today, and I like who I am now. I love who you are now, Caleb corrected, reaching over to take my hand. And who you were then, and who you will be in the future. I love all of you, Amara. Always have, always will. I squeezed his hand, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had been given a second chance at life, at love, at happiness, and I was not going to waste it. 5 years after I had first reconnected with Caleb in that grocery store, I was invited to give the commencement speech at my old high school in North Carolina. It was a full circle moment that felt almost surreal. I stood at that podium, looking out at the graduating seniors in their caps and gowns, and I saw myself at their age, full of hope and dreams, ready to take on the world, not yet knowing the challenges that lay ahead. Life is not going to be easy, I told them. You are going to face obstacles and setbacks. You are going to have moments when you feel like giving up, when you feel like you are not strong enough or smart enough or worthy enough. And in those moments, I want you to remember something. Your worth is not determined by your appearance. Your value is not measured by other people's opinions of you. You are inherently valuable, inherently worthy, simply because you exist. I saw tears in some of their eyes, saw them nodding along with my words. Do not let anyone make you feel small, I continued. Do not let anyone convince you that you need to change who you are to deserve love and respect. Be confident in who you are right now, while also working to become the best version of yourself. Those two things can coexist. You can love yourself exactly as you are, while also striving to grow and improve. The key is doing it for yourself, not for anyone else's approval. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She was plus-sized like I was, and she had tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I have struggled with my weight my whole life, and people are always telling me I need to lose weight before I can be happy or successful. But you proved that is not true. You proved I can be successful right now, exactly as I am. I pulled her into a hug. I told her, you absolutely can. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Your size does not determine your destiny. Your character, your work ethic, your determination, those are what matter. Believe in yourself and the rest will follow. As I watched her walk away, her shoulders a little straighter and her head held a little higher, I felt my mother's presence again. This was her legacy living on through me. This was Grace's life having meaning despite being so brief. This was me turning my darkest moments into light for others. That night, Caleb and I went to visit my mother's grave. We had not been back since we had gotten married, and it felt like the right time. I knelt down and placed fresh flowers on her headstone. Hi, Mama. I hope you are proud of me. I hope you can see what I have built with the investment you made. You always believed I could do great things, even when I didn't believe it myself. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything. Caleb knelt beside me and placed flowers on the small headstone next to my mother's. Grace's grave, our daughter who we visited whenever we came to North Carolina. Hi, baby girl. Your daddy and I are doing well. We think about you every day. We love you so much. We sat there for a while, the three of us, me, Caleb, and the memories of the people we had lost. And I felt at peace, not because the pain was gone, it would never be completely gone, but because I had learned to carry it with grace. I had learned to honor their memories by living fully, by being the woman they would have wanted me to be. As we walked back to our car, Caleb put his arm around my waist and pulled me close. You are so proud of me, he said. Look at everything you have accomplished. Look at how many lives you have changed. We accomplished it together, I corrected. You were there every step of the way. But you did the hard work, Caleb insisted. You faced your demons. You rebuilt yourself from the ground up. You turned your pain into purpose. That was all you, Amara. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling grateful for this man who had loved me at my lowest and celebrated me at my highest, who had never tried to change me, only supported me in becoming who I was meant to be.
Do you think we will ever stop talking about all of this? I asked. Do you think there will ever be a time when my past with Richard does not define part of my story? Caleb was quiet for a moment. I do not think it will ever stop being part of your story, he said thoughtfully, but I think over time it will become less about the pain he caused and more about the strength you found. It will become less about what he took from you and more about what you built for yourself. The story will shift from one of victimhood to one of victory. His words resonated with me deeply. That was exactly what had happened. My story was no longer about Richard and what he had done to me. It was about me and what I had done for myself. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant again. The news brought up complicated emotions. Part of me was thrilled at the chance to be a mother, but another part of me was terrified. What if something went wrong again? What if I lost this baby too? Caleb held me as I cried when I saw the positive pregnancy test. "It is going to be okay," he whispered. "This time is different. You are not living in a toxic environment. You are not under constant stress. You are healthy and happy and surrounded by people who love you. This baby is going to be fine." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the fear stayed with me throughout the entire pregnancy. This time, I had the best doctors, the best prenatal care, the best support system. Caleb was with me at every appointment, holding my hand, asking questions, making sure I was taking care of myself. He hired a personal chef to make sure I was eating nutritious meals. He arranged for me to have a therapist who specialized in pregnancy after loss. He did everything in his power to make sure I felt safe and supported. And slowly, as the months passed and the baby continued to grow healthy and strong, my fear began to transform into hope. When I went into labor at 39 weeks, right on schedule, I was surrounded by love. Caleb was by my side, coaching me through every contraction. And when our daughter was born, healthy and pink and crying loudly, I sobbed with relief and joy. We named her Hope Grace Monroe, because she represented the hope that had carried me through my darkest days, and because her middle name honored the sister she would never meet. Holding Hope in my arms for the first time, I felt like my heart might burst. This was what I had been fighting for. This is why I had worked so hard to heal and grow and become strong, so that I could be the mother this little girl deserved. "Look at her," Caleb said, his voice choked with emotion as he stroked Hope's tiny hand. "She is perfect. You are perfect. Our family is perfect." Over the next few years, life continued to bless us. The business continued to grow and thrive. We expanded internationally, opening locations in London, Paris, and Tokyo. The Grace Foundation helped thousands of women escape difficult situations and rebuild their lives. And our family grew too. We had a son 2 years after Hope was born. We named him David, after Caleb's father. I got to experience all the moments I had missed with Grace. First smiles, first words, first steps, birthday parties and scraped knees and bedtime stories, the messy, beautiful chaos of raising children with someone who truly loved me and valued me as a partner and equal. And through it all, I maintained the confidence and self-worth I had fought so hard to build. Yes, my body changed with pregnancy and motherhood. I gained weight and lost weight and gained it again. My body bore the marks of carrying children, stretch marks, softer belly, wider hips. But I looked at those marks as badges of honor, not flaws to be ashamed of. I taught my daughter Hope that her worth had nothing to do with her appearance. I taught her to be confident in who she was, to value her intelligence and kindness and creativity over her looks. I taught her to treat her body with respect and care, not because of how it looked, but because of all the amazing things it could do. And I taught my son David to value women for who they were as people and not as objects to be judged by their appearance. I taught him that real strength meant lifting others up, not tearing them down. I taught him to be the kind of man his father was, supportive, respectful, loving. One day when Hope was about 5 years old, she came home from school upset. Another child had made fun of her for being chunky. My heart broke for her, remembering how those kinds of comments had affected me as a child and throughout my life. I sat her down and looked her in the eyes. I said, "Hope, listen to me very carefully.
Your body is amazing. It lets you run and jump and dance and play. It is strong and healthy and perfect exactly the way it is. Some people are naturally smaller and some people are naturally bigger. Neither one is better or worse. They are just different. But the other kids laugh at me, Hope said, tears streaming down her face. I know, baby, I said, pulling her into my arms, and that hurts. But you know what? Those kids are wrong. And more importantly, their opinion of you does not determine your value. You're smart and kind and creative and brave. Those are the things that matter, not what your body looks like. Did kids ever make fun of you? Hope asked. I hesitated, then decided to be honest with her in an age-appropriate way. Yes, they did. And when I was older, someone I was married to before I met your daddy said very mean things about my body. He made me feel like I was not good enough. But you know what I learned? He was wrong. I was always good enough. I just had to learn to believe it. Do you believe it now? Hope asked, looking up at me with her big, innocent eyes. Yes, I do, I said firmly. I believe I am valuable and worthy exactly as I am. And I want you to believe that about yourself, too. Can you do that for me? Hope nodded, wiping away her tears. I can try. That's all I ask, I said, kissing her forehead. Just keep trying every single day. And remember that your daddy and I love you exactly the way you are. We wouldn't change a single thing about you. As Hope grew older, I watched her develop into a confident, self-assured young girl. She faced challenges and setbacks, as all children do, but she never lost sight of her inherent worth. And I knew that by teaching her those lessons, I was breaking a cycle that had plagued my own life for so long. 10 years after I had first reconnected with Caleb, I was invited to speak at a national women's conference in New York City. The theme was Rising from the Ashes, and they wanted me to be the keynote speaker. Standing on that stage in front of thousands of women, I shared my story one more time. But this time, it felt different. This time, the pain was distant, softened by time and healing. This time, the focus was entirely on the triumph, on the lessons learned, on the life I had built. I want to talk to you today about confidence, real confidence, not the kind that comes from meeting society standards or getting validation from others, but the kind that comes from within, the kind that no one can take away from you. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces hanging on every word. 10 years ago, I was in the darkest place I had ever been. I was trapped in a marriage where I was constantly criticized and belittled. I had lost my sense of self-worth. I had forgotten who I was. And I believed that if I could just change my appearance, if I could just be smaller and prettier and more acceptable, then I would finally be worthy of love. Heads were nodding throughout the audience. These women knew exactly what I was talking about. But here's what I learned through my journey. External changes mean nothing if you haven't done the internal work. Yes, I lost weight. Yes, my appearance changed, but that wasn't what saved me. What saved me was learning to love myself at any size. What saved me was recognizing my inherent worth as a human being. What saved me was understanding that I deserved respect and kindness regardless of how I looked. I took a deep breath before delivering the message I most wanted them to hear. You do not need to wait until you lose weight to be confident. You do not need to wait until you fit into a certain size to believe you are valuable. You do not need anyone's permission to take up space in this world. You are worthy right now, today, exactly as you are. And once you truly believe that, once you truly internalize that truth, then everything else falls into place. You make better choices for yourself because you love yourself.
You set healthy boundaries because you know you deserve respect. You pursue your dreams because you believe you are capable of achieving them. The applause was thunderous. After my speech, I spent hours talking with women who approached me, each one sharing her own story of struggling with confidence and self-worth. Each conversation reminded me why this work was so important. That evening, back at our hotel, Caleb and I sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. Hope and David were back in Houston with Caleb's parents, giving us a rare weekend alone together. "I am so proud of you," Caleb said, pulling me close. "Look at the impact you are having. Look at how many lives you are changing with your story." "Sometimes it is hard to believe this is really my life," I admitted. 10 years ago, I was sitting in a parking lot after being humiliated by Richard, feeling like my life was over. And now look at where I am. I have an incredible husband, 2 beautiful children, a successful career, and the opportunity to help other women. It feels like a dream. "It is not a dream," Caleb said. "It is what you deserve. It is what you worked for. It is what you built with your strength and determination." "We built it together," I corrected. "You were my partner in all of this." "And I always will be," Caleb promised, kissing my forehead. As I sat there in my husband's arms, looking out at the city below, I thought about the woman I had been and the woman I had become. The journey between those 2 versions of myself had been painful and difficult, but it had also been transformative and beautiful. I thought about Richard, still working as a janitor in one of our buildings in Charlotte. I had heard through the grapevine that he had remarried, a woman who looked nothing like me. I hoped for her sake that he had learned and grown from his mistakes. But even if he had not, that was no longer my concern. I had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying anger and resentment would only poison my own happiness, and I refused to give him that power over me anymore. I thought about Tasha, who I had heard had moved to another state and was living a quiet life. I bore her no ill will. She had been young and foolish, making poor choices just as I had made poor choices by staying with Richard as long as I did. We had all been on our own journeys, learning our own lessons. But mostly, I thought about myself, about the resilience I had discovered within me, about the strength I had found when I thought I had none left, about the confidence I had rebuilt from the ground up. I was no longer the broken woman who had been humiliated in a parking lot. I was no longer the victim of someone else's cruelty. I was a survivor, a warrior, a woman who had faced the worst life could throw at her and had emerged stronger on the other side. And most importantly, I was a woman who knew her worth, who loved herself at any size, who understood that true beauty came from within, who had learned that confidence was not about meeting external standards, but about embracing your authentic self. That was the message I would continue to share for the rest of my life, through my business, through my foundation, through my speeches and interviews and conversations. I would tell women everywhere that they were enough, just as they were, that they did not need to wait to be smaller or prettier or more acceptable to start living fully. They deserve love and respect and happiness right now, today, in this moment. Because if I could rise from the ashes and build a beautiful life, so could they. If I could find my confidence again after it had been systematically destroyed, so could they. If I could learn to love myself at any size, so could they. That was my truth. That was my testimony. That was my legacy. And as I sat there in my husband's arms, looking out at the city below, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. Gratitude for the people who had supported me along the way. Gratitude for the woman I had become. I was Amara Monroe, wife, mother, businesswoman, advocate. A woman who had been knocked down, but who had gotten back up. A woman who had been told she was worthless, but who had proven her value. A woman who had lost everything, but who had rebuilt her life into something even better than before. And I was exactly who I was meant to be. So let me ask you something, everyone watching this. What would you have done if you were in my position? Would you have forgiven Richard for what he did to me and our daughter? Would you have given him a second chance? And here's another question. Do you think I lost weight for myself or for others? Do you think I should have lost weight at all? Or should I have stayed exactly as I was to prove a point? Do you think Richard had a point and that I should have taken better care of myself from the beginning? These are hard questions, I know, but they're important ones. Because the truth is, there is no single right answer. Every woman's journey is different. Every woman has to make her own choices about her body, her relationships, her life. What I want you to take away from my story is this. You deserve to be confident in who you are right now. Not when you lose weight, not when you meet someone else's standards. Right now, today, in this moment. Your worth is not determined by your size or your appearance. It is inherent in who you are as a person. But I also want you to know that if you choose to make changes to your body, whether that's losing weight, gaining weight, building muscle, or anything else, do it for yourself. Do it because it makes you feel strong and healthy and happy. Do not do it to please someone else or to meet society standards. Do it because you love yourself enough to take care of yourself. That is what real confidence looks like. That is what self-love looks like. And that is what I hope you will remember from my story. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment down below and tell me, would you ever forgive your ex-husband if he treated you the way Richard treated me? Would you have lost weight for yourself or for other people? Would you remarry after going through something like what I went through? Or do you think Richard had a point and that I should have taken better care of myself from the beginning? I want to know your thoughts. I want to know your stories. Because we're all in this together, learning and growing and supporting each other. And if you're new here, please subscribe to Precipice Stories and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a video. We have over 80 stories on this channel, covering every genre you can imagine. Romance, drama, inspiration, real-life experiences. There's something for everyone. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And check out our other videos. You won't be disappointed. Thank you for watching my story. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, you are valuable. You are worthy. And you are enough, exactly as you are. This is Amara Monroe, reminding you to love yourself first, always. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.